Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yasmina Tawil. I'm the film programming curator at the Arab Film and Media Institute. I'm very excited to talk to Cyril Aris tonight about his film Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano, which is playing at the 28th Arab Film Festival, taking place in the San Francisco Bay Area, October 24th to November 3rd, as well as online. If for whatever reason you're watching this before watching his film, you can catch it at the New Parkway on Friday, November 1st, or online in the United States throughout the festival. Hi, Cyril. Thank you so much for talking with me tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for programming the film. It's a festival where I played also my previous films, and it's always been extremely rewarding. And I really appreciate all the work you do to promote Arab cinema in the Bay Area and in the US in general.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really happy to have your work back in the festival again. And this moment feels very full circle since I moderated the Q&A with you for Costa Brava, Lebanon in New York when that came out. And this film is obviously directly attached to that film. So it feels full circle right now. And I'm excited to talk about it. I'm going to start just at the very beginning and ask about how it started. At what point so sorry to back up a little bit. Obviously, you were involved in the production of Costa Brava, Lebanon, which this film follows the production of that film. At what point did you decide to pick up the camera? Was it purely after the port explosion, or were you toying with the idea of documenting this process before that started?
Yeah, no, it very much started with the port explosion of Beirut on August 4th, 2020. Being part of the Costa Brava crew, I'm the editor of the film, so I was more involved in the post production. But this is a film that for 2 years kept getting pushed because of all the different crises that we had in Lebanon, be it the political crisis, the economical crisis, the financial crisis, COVID, all of these different crises were hitting the country, and then the port explosion was really the last nail in the coffin. And I do remember on the day after the explosion, I was walking in Beirut, and kind of like discovering the consequences of the blast on the city that was really completely disfigured and completely wounded. And our parents used to tell us that they had 15 years of civil war to get to this. We had it in like 5 seconds, and this was a bit like the trauma of our generation. And trying to adapt to this new reality and getting accustomed to this is what Beirut looks like now was a very difficult process, of course. And the only tool I have is just to lift a camera and try to start documenting this and discover or rediscover the city through the lens or through a camera. And I was documenting a bit like all these efforts of reconstruction, because Lebanese people really went from all corners of Lebanon. They flocked into the city of Beirut to start cleaning up, because of course our government was completely absent, and our government is the main culprit and the main reason why the port exploded. So I was documenting that, but that of course doesn't necessarily sustain a story, like a narrative story. And I was asking really myself, like, what's the role, what's my role as a filmmaker in this new context, in this new reality, and what's the role of art and cinema? And I saw that Munia and her team, like the Costa Brava crew, were asking themselves the same question, because at the time of the blast they were in the production house, Abud Production, which is very close to the port. So the whole the office kind of blew up, and they went to the hospital and they were injured, and they were really trying to recover from that and wondering if they should continue with their film or they should abandon it. Like, what is really the meaning of their film in this context? I saw that it was a bit like the same question that we were asking ourselves, which is the bigger question of the role of art and cinema in times of crisis. So I decided, to point my camera at them, because I knew that I had this narrative, this question mark that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I was like, are they going to shoot the film? What kind of obstacles are they going to have to overcome? And through this, very specific story, I could tell the bigger story of Beirut that is trying to overcome all of these obstacles and trying to kind of wake up from the nightmare that August 4th was.
Yeah, it's such an admirable and a big topic to take on. I was going to ask if you had a vision when you started, and it sounds like you did have an idea of what you at least wanted to explore, but maybe not how it would unfold. Did sort of the vision for the film change at all from what you thought it was going to be when you started, or did it kind of go in line? I mean, obviously stuff happened that you were not expecting, but did yeah.
Of course, initially because the whole film started on based on an instinct and a drive to just document in the moment, and because of the urgency of the moment, there was no development of the project. It's not like I sat on a table and started thinking like, how can I structure this documentary? It was really like, we need to shoot because things are happening now, and the story is happening now, and that's actually the most attractive part of a documentary, is to discover the film that you're making. Like, there's an impulse that drives you to keep filming, but then it forces you to stay a bit open to the current events and what's happening around you. And I do remember that initially I really wanted it to be a story about art in all disciplines. So I was filming the filmmakers, so Munya and Miriam and their crew, but I was also filming musicians who had a concert that was supposed to happen in a club that's basic, pretty much at the port, and that blew up pieces, and they kind of decided that they were still going to give their concert even to no audience, because it was just important for them to just do their concert and release their album, and not succumb to the desperation of we cannot even do a live concert. In Beirut. I was following a sculpture that was kind of like grabbing pieces or debris from the port, and creating like beautiful art out of it. So I was following all of these different disciplines, but then I realized that with the filmmakers being part of the crew, I had the closest relationship. So like I had access to unfiltered thoughts, emotions, and opinions, and that was the most attractive part of this documentary for me, because it's not necessarily the production of the film. Actually, I kind of like couldn't care much about what's how the film is being made, but I was interested in the moments before and the moments after, and especially the state of mind as they're going through these moments of strength and perseverance, but mostly the moment of weaknesses and doubts and fears, which were a reflection of my own doubts and fears. So I was able to like project some of these questions that I had on them. And then the project evolved in the sense where I started referencing older Lebanese cinema in the film, and of course, like, you start adding all of these layers and different thematics that you cannot think of as you're doing the film, but they arise in post-production mostly.
You keep touching on so many things that I want to ask about, and trying to think of where the next best direction would be to go. I would love to know, I do want to explore more about the role of making art during times of crisis and of turmoil. But before that, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you navigated living through all of this, because sometimes documentarians can be sort of at a distance from what they're documenting, but you were living through it, not to mention that these were your friends and your colleagues. How do you manage that?
I think it's by making the film. I've realized that it's the easiest way to to try to deal with, at least for me, to try to deal with like an immense pain that I cannot express, or a question that I cannot answer. Because of course we're talking about the role of art, but that is very much tied to our role as citizens in Lebanon, and as human beings who constantly have to deal with this question of leaving versus staying, fighting for our country versus giving up. And that question seems to be so inherent to the Lebanese identity. And when I said that I was referencing older Lebanese cinema, it's because these older films were also asking themselves the same question. Like they were revolving around that topic of leaving versus staying. And Costa Brava, the film that I'm documenting in Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano, also raises this question to its own fictitious characters. So I think that navigating all of these emotional challenges for me are done through a film, and through asking myself, through throwing that question onto other characters, and try to find characters that give us like the whole spectrum of intense hope all the way to heavy desperation, and try to locate myself, or let the audience locate themselves within that spectrum, because I think everyone falls somewhere in that spectrum, and that that position can change like overnight. So with like over the recent year, I've always had moments where I thought that this could be a catalyst for change. Maybe we are not going to get into this war, and maybe the Lebanese leadership will realize the immense responsibility that they have towards their people. And when I see the unity among people during the war, that gives me a sense of optimism and hope. But then at the same time, you're seeing your country being destroyed for I don't know, for me in my lifetime, this will be like the third time. And that creates like a deep sense of cynicism. So I guess that's how I was navigating a bit all of these complexities while making the film.
Yeah, I can't imagine having to navigate all that and continue to take care of yourself and stuff. I can imagine to a certain degree, because we're
well, living in the Middle East, I think everyone has some sense of navigating crisis, and whether it's political, economical, whatever, or but also the personal and the like the emotional toll that the social context and the political context can impose on the locals.
So I would love to talk about about making art during crises, and I would love to hear just your thoughts on it, about maybe what you kind of learned or uncovered in creating Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano, and maybe if any of your feelings or thoughts have changed with the sort of worsening of things in Lebanon and in our region in the last year. I feel like this film is in really interesting conversation with a number of other films at the festival. There's a lot of Lebanese people, or Lebanese filmmakers, I should say, making art about the last few years in Lebanon, as well as a really interesting film we're showing called From Ground Zero, where filmmakers in Gaza made short films over the course of the last year. But yeah, so I would love to talk more about your thoughts about making art during a time where art might feel frivolous.
That's a very good way to put it. And I again, this was one of the main questions in Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano. Like, is art completely trivial and unnecessary by the end of the day? Like, is it only a selfish act that rewards the artists themselves, or does it have any impact on society? And I have to admit that as I was making the film, sometimes I was feeling like this is just this is like the most selfish thing that I am doing for myself and for my own well-being. But you know, with a bit of perspective, I think that these films are actually very important. And you know, this is not, you know, me, you know, tapping filmmakers on the shoulder saying, you know, we're doing a great job. But I think that the problem in the Arab world, well, in Lebanon specifically, is that art is a substitute for history, for history books, basically. In the case of Lebanon, we do not have like a common history that is written upon, recognized, and reconciliated with. You know, every sect or every political faction has their own version of the history. I'm referring specifically to the Civil War. And it feels that because we do not have this common history, we cannot get over it. And we keep making the same mistakes, and history keeps repeating itself because we don't learn from history. And for me, you know, personally, it's Lebanese cinema. It's older films from the 70s and the 80s of Jocelyn Saab, Maroon Baghdadi, Burhan Alawi, you know, all of these amazing filmmakers that documented so thoroughly the Civil War, that made me experience the, you know, what it was like to be in the streets of Lebanon in that context. And that really served as a substitute for the lack of knowledge of history at school or you know, in the public discourse in Lebanon. So like, I do think that all of these films, you know, you're saying that there's a bunch of filmmakers that felt the need in the last few years to document the crisis. It really does have a social and a historical value, because these films stand as kind of a testimony of what it was like, or what, you know, it is like to live under this period. And beyond the simple numbers of Lebanon went through a financial crisis where over $100 billion vanished from the bank. It's like, okay, that's, you know, that's a number, and it, you know, it can be shocking, but you know, when you're watching a film, you're actually experiencing what that means. In, you know, in very, very simple, you know, day-to-day activities. And I think that has a much stronger impact than just reading the facts in a you know, in a cold way in a newspaper or something like that. And you know, of course, I'm you know, I'm kind of confining this to the context of Lebanon, but this can be extrapolated to like any, you know, any war, any crisis, any kind of period in any country. But again, I think in Lebanon and in the Arab world, it's specifically important because we don't have that common history. So, you know, I think this is kind of like what the benefit of art can be. And, you know, it goes beyond, you know, film and cinema, but it goes to music, literature, you know, all of these different activities, disciplines of art.
Yeah, I've you know, in my own life in the last year, both me personally and through AFMI, we've been doing a lot of Palestinian, in particular, programming, and every once in a while, it felt like so, like I said before, almost frivolous to have these, but it's important to, you know, especially being in the diaspora, to be able to look at these histories, because I'm now talking about Palestine specifically, but while a lot of it is documented, a lot of it's not learned here. And the amount of people and art, especially I would say film, can be such an accessible medium for learning. It can be hard to get someone to sit down and read a long book or even an essay. And I found a lot of people kind of like learning, you know, they came to the screening with some solidarity already, but really like learning the history, the context, the details, and feeling very connected to people in like a more direct and intimate way. It can be such an important tool, even when it feels like, you know, not a necessity, when you're just trying to survive or trying to fight, if you're on for other people and stuff like that.
No, of course, you know, it's Roger Ebert who said, you know, movies are empathy machines, basically. And you know, I stand by this this quote very much, because I think that it's one thing to, you know, learn, since we're talking about the Palestinian war right now, you know, it's one thing to like learn and read about it. And even, you know, watching it on social media, it's one thing, but like sitting through a film which has been, you know, films are like symphonies, you know, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you know, they're trying to make you feel something, and try to you know, at least that's the goal, to project a visceral experience with the viewer. And I think that even if you're in disagreement, or you're neutral, or you're ignorant about the ABCs of the conflict, I think that the simple fact of experiencing this through the eyes of a Palestinian filmmaker, or you know, a filmmaker of any nationality, can help you understand or experience what it's like to be, you know, to be in Gaza in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool too to combat all of the sort of the untrue and negative media that we get served here in the West as well.
Yeah, for sure, because it's all, you know, fitting political agendas, and you know, it has its own curation of what it wants to show, what it doesn't want to show. But I think, you know, at least for an increasing number of people, especially the youth, there is, you know, an increased awareness of how biased the mainstream media is, and how filtered the images and the information that you know, get broadcast are. So like, you know, I think that's a good thing, that people might turn into other you know, other types of you know, like films, basically, like films, to try to experience or understand a bit more.
I would love to go back to something you've mentioned a couple of times about being inspired by or referencing older Arab cinema. Could you speak a little bit more to maybe specific filmmakers you looked at, and how they influenced this film?
Yeah. In this film, I'm, you know, mostly referencing one filmmaker, who's Maroun Baghdadi. So, you know, Maroun Baghdadi is like the godfather of Lebanese cinema. You know, he was a very prolific filmmaker that worked in the 70s and in the 80s, and documented a lot the war. So, you know, even in his fiction films, he was you know, talking about the war, and in his documentaries, of course, he talked about the war. And his films were quite inaccessible for you know, for us, because you know, they were a bit like lost films. Maroun Baghdadi himself died at quite a young age, you know, like in his 40s, in very dark, you know, circumstances. You know, it's very obscure how exactly, you know, like what really was the cause of death.
I went to a screening, sorry, this is an aside, and they really started the screening by being like, talking about the way he died. I feel like it's a point of fascination for people.
Well, yeah, no, because, you know, it's like when this filmmaker got too big and too popular, all of a sudden he disappeared.
Oh,
there's something
I see. Okay.
yeah, there's something a bit fishy about that. But anyway, so yeah, so, you know, his films were quite inaccessible. And then there's you know, an amazing organization based in Lebanon that's called Nadi Likull Nas, that did like this work of research and you know, remastering, you know, finding the films, remastering them, you know, making them accessible. So, you know, I kind of discovered the fiction films in the early 2010s, and then in 2020 I discovered the documentaries, because the documentaries were made accessible. And I was very much struck by the documentary that I'm referencing the most in Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano, which is called Whispers. And it was made in the 1980s, and it, you know, it was about it follows this Lebanese writer and poet, Nadia Twaini, who, you know, comes to Beirut after 5 years of civil war. She was living in France or something, and she, you know, she's walking in the streets of Beirut, kind of like rediscovering the city, and you know, writing poetry about it. And then she goes and meets people from all corners of Lebanon and starts having conversations with them. Why did you stay? Why are you leaving? What gives you hope? like, you know, why are you giving up? You know, all of these questions that basically I'm asking my own characters, and it felt so relevant. It felt like I was watching a film from 2020, really, like a film that was made now.
Yeah.
There's even a chapter where she goes to the port of Beirut, and she has a conversation with the head of the port, and she's like, you know, like, you guys are not shutting down. You have all of these thousands of workers that are coming, you know, and working despite the risks that the journey to the port poses, and like, you know, why'd you do that? And he tells her, well, listen, you know, the port is the heart of the country. Like, if we lose the port, we would lose the entire country. And, you know, like, you know, there's such relevance to this documentary that it you know, it really felt like I'm watching a documentary made today. And I was using it as a reference in the beginning, but then I decided, you know what, maybe I should start including these excerpts and these scenes in the film to try to create this communication between contemporary Lebanese cinema and older Lebanese cinema. You know, because the fact that they're asking themselves the same questions in these films is, in a nutshell, the tragedy of Lebanon. It's the fact that history repeats itself. So art, which is a reflection of the, you know, social context, repeats itself, and Lebanon ends up, you know, being stuck in this cyclical tragedy and this loop of repeating history.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, like you know, I thought after the port explosion, I was convinced that this was really the lowest point of Lebanese history. Like, it could not get any lower. And, you know, I guess now we're seeing that it can get significantly worse.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't even have anything to say about it except that it breaks my heart.
Yeah, but
the lightest way of talking about it, but I, on a little bit of a lighter note, I wanted to ask about sort of to continue this conversation about Lebanese cinema. It's a fantastic and very rich history of cinema in Lebanon. If someone watching is new to Lebanese cinema, do you have one or two films or filmmakers you'd recommend they look into?
Yeah, you know, first of all, it depends what kind of. I mean, you know, I guess the most accessible, you know, filmmakers and that I admire are, of course, Nadine Labake and Ziad Douairi. These are, you know, I would say the more they're more known, you know, internationally, because their films, you know, were screened internationally and you know, got accolades everywhere. So, you know, that's definitely a good, you know, starting point. And then you know, going back a bit to the older cinema, of course, like the whole filmography of Maroon Baghdadi, I really admire. Randa Shahad, also great female filmmaker. Jocelyn Saab, great female filmmaker also. And you know, and then you can go back, you know, even to the 50s. George Nasser, who's like, you know, the first film. You know, one of the first the first Lebanese film that went to the Cannes Film Festival. So, you know, that had, you know, some kind of like an international recognition. So, you know, you can start going back, you know, once you're like, once you've passed, I think the more accessible ones, and then you can you know, go more into the art house.
Yeah, there's there's such an amazing history. I'm still even discovering a lot of it. But I'm very, very grateful to have the Maroon Baghdadi box set that was picked up for me as a gift. So I have them forever on physical media, at least. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the recommendations. I hope if someone is watching who doesn't know, they'll watch some of these films. And just to kind of wrap things up, I would love to, I know you are currently editing. Can you tell us at all about any upcoming projects, anything we should look out for from you?
Yes, of course. So right now I'm in post-production for my first fiction feature. So after having done 2 feature documentaries, now like I've done a fiction film. It was also shot in Lebanon in the spring, which was, it's great that we actually shot in the spring, because in the beginning we had a debate: are we going to shoot in the spring or in the fall?
Yeah.
Now would have been impossible. So yeah, it's the story of it's called It's a Sad and Beautiful World, and it follows the relationship between a man and a woman over the course of 40 years. So from their childhood all the way to their adulthood and when they're parents. And it traces this romance between them, and it's told in parallel to the recent history of Lebanon. So in a way you're tracing these two, the history of the couple and the story of the couple and the story of the country in parallel. See how they become a reflection of one another. And it's a comedy and a drama at the same time. So I'm very excited to hopefully share it with your festival.
Yeah. I hope so too. Yeah, clearly we're big fans of your work, and I'm very excited to see your foray into fiction.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and talking with us, even about these heavy topics. I really appreciate your insight, and I really appreciate this film that you made. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. An absolute pleasure. Thank you. And I hope it resonates with your audience in the Bay Area.
Me too.